In this tutorial, we're going to look at making a web banner. A web banner obviously used to be placed on websites. For us, it's going to be placed on our assignment 7, the web site, the one page that we're just going to place on there. I'm just going to Command N, File New, and make a new banner. Now, there's varying sizes for varying websites. A company might say, give me these dimensions, make a banner for those dimensions, and then you send them that banner. But this one that I've made is 1000 by 250 because it's going to fit our site quite nicely. Always work in RGB, so we have access to everything in Photoshop, and we're just going to create. And there we are right there. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And at the beginning, we see that there's a locked icon on the first layer. Just going to click off of that just to have access to it. And I'm just going to click the rectangle button, and I'm just going to click a background layer here. I'm going to color that up a little bit. So what I could do, I could have also just colored this layer, but I chose to make another one. Once again, non-destructive, adding more layers, doing different things with them. Just going to double click inside that little icon here, and I can change the color. Now the color I had that I was kind of working with is a bit of like a browny color. You could choose any kind of color you want. Doesn't really matter from your swatches. I'm just going to work with this for now, and I can change it after. Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into Illustrator and bring in the graphic that I made for this company, or that I worked with for this company, I should say. And I'm just copying a vector graphic, Command C, and bringing it into Photoshop, Command V. I'm going to make it a smart object. That way it's, once again, a better idea to use non-destructive smart objects. I could size them up and down any size I want, and they'll never lose their quality, especially coming from being a vector. So there it is right there. I'm going to work with that. Next, I'm going to make a clipping mask area. So I'm just going to click and drag a rectangle. And as I should mention, I'm working in Adobe CC 2019, so things might look a little bit different in some of the functionality, but I'll go through that, not a big deal. So there's my rectangle where I'm going to put pictures into my clipping masks. So what I've done, I've already found 3 images that we're taking for this restaurant that were given to me, and I'm just going to use them. So I just grab them, click and drag them into Photoshop, and now here they are. They show up as separate tabs. I'm just going to click on one, click and drag it into my new document. There it is. I can close that because remember, once you click and drag them in, they're embedded. They're not linked. You can just work with it that way. Click and drag and drop. Perfect. Close that. Or obviously the other way I could do it too. Click off of the locked layer in your picture, Command C, go into your new document, Command V, and there they are. And here are my 3 pictures, and here's my clipping area, that little rectangle that I made right here that I want these 3 pictures to go into. So the 3 ways to do it. I can click on, well, it doesn't matter. If I hover over holding Option, I can click and click and click in between, and they become clipping masks. Now everything is inside that one layer. Alternatively, what I could do, select all 3, make sure the images are above the clipping mask you want them to go into, and right click and create clipping mask. Well, what I should also do is make them, convert them to smart objects, so I can retain the quality of them right now as is without, when I transform them down, they don't lose anything. Convert to smart object, convert to smart object, and convert to smart object. And there I can tell they're converted to smart objects because these little icons that are there as well. So there I go. So what I could do, start with the first one. I'll shut these ones off. I'm just going to size it down, Command T, or Edit Free Transform. And I'm just going to size them and fit them in that little area there so I get the best cropping and how I want them to be seen. That looks pretty good there. And I'll do the same here, Command T, really, really big. So let me zoom out to catch it all. Hold down Alt from the center, hold down Shift if you have to for proportional, but in 2019 you don't hold down Shift anymore for making it proportional. It does it automatically. Okay. And there we go. Great. So really quickly, just kind of sizing those up, making them fit inside there nicely. So I have 3 images inside the clipping mask. What I'm going to do, I'm also going to group these. It's very important to group. I'm going to hold down, click on the top, hold down Shift, click on the last one I want, it selects them all, Command G, and I can call that picture. And I'm going to do the same actually with these bottom 2, which are also my background, so I'm just going to call them background layers, background. And even though this is just a logo, I'm still going to group that. Even one logo I could put in there, I'm going to call it logo. Great. And there we go. Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a button. So we are still looking at making that button there, the button, and maybe a little bit of a, actually, no, I'm just going to copy this from this one here, Command C, bring it into my document, Command V. Great. I can just size that down, or I could even just play around with it if I select it, and I could change up the typeface or do whatever I want, make it a little bit bigger, smaller, whatever I want to work with there, and play around with your type capabilities there in Photoshop. Next, I'm going to make a button. So I'm just going to click a rectangle, and I'm just going to click and drag. Now, there's a few things we can do here. I'm going to click and drag roughly a button like that. And if I look down here in my properties panel, I can actually play around with the radius of the corners. 5 pixel. Click on the rest, it automatically converts all the rest of them because of this little link there. And now I have a bit of a corner radius on them. I could have also alternatively used a rounded rectangle, but I just want to show you some of the properties you can play around with here. The width and the height, the color of it, the stroke, if there's going to be a stroke, what type of stroke around it. A few different things you can do here. So there I am, happy with my button. So what I want to show you now is layer styles and different effects that we could apply to this button. So the layer styles can be accessed by just double clicking on the open space in that layer. So I'm double click here, and there we go. Layer styles opens up. I have options to bevel, emboss, stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, all these different ones here. What I'm going to add first is maybe a gradient overlay. I'll click on that. I'll click on my, so if you just click on and off the actual area here with the check mark, it just accesses those. But it doesn't actually show you the options here. You have to click on the name, and that gives you the options. So there we go. I can change up the blending mode, the opacity of the gradient. Let me play with the gradient first. I click on that. Maybe I'll click one that's already there, and maybe I'll play around with different colors. Maybe I'll choose a color from here that I like. Say, oh, it's okay there. I'll double click on this green, and I'll choose another color. That's nice. And I'll say okay. And now I have a little bit of a nice little gradient there. And I'll just play around with, obviously, the opacity. I'll play around with the direction of it. I'll reverse that, and maybe I'll play around the scale, how much of the gradient I actually want, how well it blends together. And that's looking pretty good. I'm fine with that. Next, I'll add a stroke. I'm just going to click on the word, and it also highlights, checks it, and it shows me the options here. I can size it up or down. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Because of the contrast for mine, I'm going to make it white, and I'll make it outside. And blending mode I'll leave, opacity I'll leave, the color, obviously I'm happy with, well, even more of a stark white, there we go. I'll add a bit of a drop shadow here too. Once again, with effects, you want to talk about subtlety, you don't want to go overboard, but at the same time you want to make them look nice and, you know, so people know that there are effects there. Let me bring it up a little bit in terms of there. And once again, anything you're doing here is actually happening here, so just in case you can't see what you're doing, it's right there. So a bit of a drop shadow, maybe I'll add an inner shadow as well. Bring up the inner shadow to 100 so I can see what's going on. Bring down the distance, which I'm a fan of. Bring up the size, and maybe I'll bring down that opacity again. And there we go. Okay, so there is my button, looking pretty good. I'll show you one more thing actually. I'm going to add a pattern overlay, but notice how I click on pattern overlay. That's the pattern, but it's not showing. That's because the pattern is underneath the gradient overlay. So what I need to do is bring down the opacity of the gradient overlay, and now what starts to happen is the pattern just starts to show through. So I'll bring up the gradient a little bit more, but I still want to see a bit of that pattern. There we go. And the pattern, same idea. I could play around with that, how much I want to see, the scale of it, but I'm going to bring it down right about there and say okay. Great. So there's my button. Now I'm going to put some type over top of it. I just click on the text tool, just type, click here. I just want to play around, show you a little bit about variable typefaces as well. So here I'm going to choose a variable typeface. In my character panel, I'm going to click on Acumen. Acumen is a popular new variable typeface. And with variable typefaces, you could actually select your typeface, and you can now play around with not just certain fonts that are italic or bold or anything like that. You could actually play around now in the properties panel with very specific widths, weight and slants, and different typefaces. Variable typefaces allow you to do different things. So I can make the width or the weight as thin or as thick as possible, so bold or light. I can make it condensed or extended as much as I want, or I could slant it or not slant it at all. You also have these options in here. There's quite a few different fonts that you could choose before this typeface. There's a lot, but obviously you could also do plenty of steps in between as well. So this one, I'm a big fan of condensed, or maybe a little bit thicker and slightly condensed. And there we go. And I'm also a fan of uppercase I'll play around with that, place it over top, and maybe what I'll do here too, I will double click on it and make a, maybe, sorry, not inner shadow, but a drop shadow. Add a little bit of depth to that too, so it stands out even more. And even let's look at the layer styles here again. So this layer has FX on it, so that's the layer style. If I click on that arrow, it shows me all the different effects that are there. The stroke that I added, and I could turn them on and off if I don't want certain ones shown, whatever the case may be. Also, what I could do, I can actually click on that, hold down Option, click and drag over to my logo, and now those exact same layer styles that I applied there are now applied to my logo, which obviously I wouldn't do, but that's the case, I can. And if I want to get rid of them, I can just click and drag them onto the trash, and they're gone. So it's a pretty cool thing that you could do with layer styles and duplicating them. Also, I could right click, copy layer style, go to another layer, right click, and paste the layer style. So you can do this to multiple layers if you'd like, but that's entirely up to you. So very flexible layer styles are what you could do with them. So that's that right there, pretty good. And now the other thing I want to show you, I'm going to group these two together, my button all together, the word and the rectangle. Command G, grouped, and I'm just going to call it button. And what I could do now is I can actually size it up as big as I want. Looks good. Size it down as small as I want. Still looks good. Size it back up again. And it doesn't lose quality. These are vector style raster graphics, which is kind of weird. But for the most part, these tools right here, the text tool, the shape tool, obviously your selection tools, and the pen tool are all vector actually based shapes. So they are treated like vectors. They have the characteristics of vectors, but they're actually raster images. If you zoom in, obviously you can see that they are rasterized with pixels, but they're treated like vectors. So you can scale them up really big or really small, and they still remain very good quality. So that's always a good thing to use. Once again, non-destructive way to play around with things is using these vector tools. Great. So I'm happy with that and everything that's looking good. Now what I want to do, I actually want to create that animation where this moves around. So let me go to Window and open up my timeline. The timeline is going to open up down here. And what I could do, I want to create a frame animation. Yours might show video timeline. We're going to create a frame animation and just click on Create Frame Animation. So now what I'm going to do to get a sense of how animation works, just let's look at this real quick. So here's a timeline. Here's frame 1. It shows me the amount of seconds it's going to last for, 0 seconds. I can loop it forever. We'll keep forever on for now. And I could play it, but nothing to play yet. And I could add some more. So what I'm going to do in this state right now, this is what my first frame looks like right here. If I add a new frame, it's called Duplicate Frame. It's the exact same thing. So let's change the visibility of something. Let's go to my picture and change the visibility of the next one. So here's the pizza. So now in this frame is the picture of the pizza. In this frame is still the gnocchi. So let me add one more frame and click off of the last one, and there are the rice balls. So in this frame, you can see it shows just the pasta. In this frame, it shows just the pizza. And in this frame, it shows the rice balls. Frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. All right? So I have all three. Now if I just play it, that's your animation. But if I now select all of them, select number 1, shift click and hold down number 3, right click on the time, and let's just make it maybe a 1 second delay, and I'll press play. And now this is kind of a more common web banner that you see in animation where it just kind of subtly goes through. Now to make the transition a little bit smoother, I could add something that is called tweens. So what this does, I click on here and it asks me, where do you want to tween it to? Where do you want that animation to flow to? Here, I'll say next frame, and let's say 5 frames. The more frames you have, the smoother it is, but we're going to say 5. We'll say OK. So what it did, it added 5 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to convert those not to 0 seconds, but to no delay. Now I'm going to do the same with that next pizza one. I'm going to click tween, 5 frames, OK. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold on, shift and click. Convert those to no delay as well. And last one here, the rice balls, I'm going to tween again, but now I can't tween it to the next frame. I have to tween it to the first frame. Say OK. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right click and no delay. So now if I play it, it kind of does a little bit of a cross dissolve to the next one, and it kind of a little smoother transition. It's just something you could add, not necessary, but it's, you know, makes it a little bit easier on the eyes than that quick changing. And there we go. Stop. Perfect. So I have all those. I could throw them out if I want to. I could play around with them any way I want. Another option, obviously, is to just add yes and add a new frame. And maybe this one I'll save the picture, but maybe I'll click off click here, and it kind of just plays around like that. So just kind of click here is on and off. That's another type of animation, very simple. One frame shows one thing in the layer panel. The other frame shows something else in the layer panel. And that's all we're really doing is turning on and off the actual visibility of a certain layer. And that's it. That's how that actually works there. And then what you do to save that, because this is just an animation in Photoshop. To save it as an animated GIF, we're going to go to File, Export, Save for Web. And here I have two up. And I could save it as anything, but it's going to be a GIF. And the reason why it's an animated GIF is because a GIF is the only file format that supports an animation. SVGs and all that I think do too, but right now we're just looking at GIFs, not JPEGs or PNGs, but the GIF. And if I look at that, it has all the colors, it has no dither, or dither's at 100% I should say, and we're good to go. And if I want, I could actually play that animation, and that's the animation I have. So yeah, that's what I like, perfect. I'll save it onto my desktop or wherever you're going to save it properly. And we'll say save, and there we go. So now what I could do with that animated GIF, I could select it, I could actually bring it into a browser, and it shows me the animation of that GIF. Then we'd have a developer to put some code behind it, and so when they click on it, it actually goes to another website, and that's it. That's how we do the animated GIF. I'm going to show you one more in Illustrator here and how to make this kind of rotating animation here. So we're going to make this graphic, bring it into Photoshop, and animate it. So let's start off with that. I'm going to select a circle. It is going to be my reference point. So any size circle doesn't matter. There we go, because we're actually going to delete it later. Then I'm going to select a rectangle tool, and I'm just going to click and drag my rectangle tool there. Perfect. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to convert the circles to rounded corners. So if I click one circle and drag it in, it converts all the corners to rounded edges. Perfect, like a little pill. Select both, and on your control panel up here, if you don't have it, window, control, you could just align them horizontally, or you could go to window, align, and do the same thing. So now that they're perfectly aligned, perfect. So now what I'm going to do, click on your rectangle tool, and also click on your rotate tool. Hold down Option, and with your smart guides on, if they're not on, go to View, Smart Guides. With your smart guides on, you're just going to hold down Option and try to find the center of that circle. With smart guides, it shows you that's the center. I'm going to click, and a dialog box shows up. I'm going to click on 45 degrees because this kind of works best. I'm going to preview it. I'm going to press, instead of pressing OK, I'm going to press copy. Copy just duplicates what we just did. Perfect. And now what I can do in Illustrator, what we can do is when we press Command D, it does the exact same thing that we just did over and over and over again. So Command D until we complete our circle. Perfect. So I can delete this. And now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to bring down the colors of these individual so we can see how it would rotate, just kind of like I did here. So what I could do, I'll click on the first one. There's actually a few different ways to do it. I could do a transparency and show the difference in transparency and bring it down. I'll bring it down 10% each one. Let me bring this over here, and I'll make that 90%, and I'll make that 80%, and I'll make that 70, and so on, just so we can start seeing a difference. And this is going to show us that motion that we are looking to achieve with our animated GIF. The other way you could have done this also, if you wanted to, you could have actually changed the color of it. So if I had this exact same thing here, bring it down, make everything black again, oh, bring up the transparency. Sorry, I should have done that for everything. Great, make everything black again. And actually here I could have done the opposite thing where I could actually just change the tint of it. So here I make that 90 and 80 and 70. Now that depends on what kind of animated GIF you want. If this is going to go over a certain type of background, well, the transparency would show that background, where these will not show that background. Just to show you that as well. Okay. But either way, I'm going to show you this one here. Okay, so I'm just going to click and drag this one, copy, bring it into Photoshop, create a new document. I'm just going to make this one 500 by 500 so I can fit in my animation there. 500, 500, 72 pixels per inch, RGB. Perfect. Create. And there we are. Command V, Smart Object, OK. And there it is. I'm just going to press Enter, and there we are. So now what I want to do, I want to rotate it. I want to create 8 versions of it and rotate each one slightly. So what I'm going to do, there it is right there as is, and Command J, and duplicated it automatically. Command T, I'm going to rotate it. Hold down Shift and rotate it one time around 45 degrees. Command J, duplicate that one again. Command T, rotate that one 45 degrees. Command J again, and then Command T. I'm going to duplicate the layer and rotate it. Hold down Shift as you rotate it so it stays perfectly circle. Command J, Command T, and rotate it. Once again, I'm going to do this 8 times to make up for the 8 points that I have made here. And how many do I have? 1, 2, and one more. And there we go. And if we look at what we've done here, we can see where this gray point is, the next one will be up here. The next one will be here, and the next one, and so on as we've rotated each one. So I'm going to start with the first one on and all of them off. I'm going to create a new frame animation. There's my first frame showing the one layer visible. Create a new one, shut this one off, turn this one on. Create a new one, shut that off, and shut that on, turn that on. So as you go, you're going to make each one visible. And that's it. So I have 8 frames and 8 layers, and in each one of the layers is showing. If I just press play, there's my animation. And there we go. So that's how that is done. And once again, if I want to, File, Export, Save for Web, and I can just say, yeah, it's a GIF, and that's good, and save, and there it is. I've saved it, desktop, I'll save it, whatever, that's fine, doesn't matter. You know how to save it properly, and then we'll go from there. If I go back here to my animation here, what I do want to show is how to actually get this banner onto my website. So let me open up my website really quickly. And there it is, great. So what I could do, I'm going to go to my banner that I made, and I'm just going to do 2 ways to do it. Command A selects everything, and we can see that everything is selected by these marching ants that are around everything. Or I could have just selected my rectangle marquee tool, click and drag over everything, and once again that's selected. And here I'm going to go to Edit, Copy Merged, and it selects everything that's visible. So everything is copied to go to my website, and Command V, and there's my banner. Now what you're going to do is you're going to move it around however you want to do it and place it in there so it fits nicely in between either a section or however you're going to do it. But that's how you'd bring in your banner to your website. And that's how you make an animated GIF as well.